In our episodes, we discuss cases and topics that might be distressing or disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. If you listen to true crime, you are probably familiar with the iconic image of missing kids on the sides of milk cartons. But have you ever heard of the original milk carton kids? Between 1982 and 1986, 3 young boys, all paperboys, were abducted from Des Moines, Iowa. To this day, they have never been found. Of the 3 cases, Johnny Gosch, Eugene Martin, and Mark Allen, Johnny Gosch's abduction is the one you've probably heard of. He is often referred to as one of the original milk carton kids, and both he and Eugene Martin had their faces on missing posters they used to put on milk cartons. Johnny Gosch and Eugene Martin were actually some of the first missing kids to be displayed on milk cartons around the country. The milk carton program was started in September of 1984 when Anderson Erickson Dairy in Des Moines began to run photos and short biographies of Johnny Gosch and Eugene Martin on the sides of half-gallon milk cartons. Soon after this, the idea exploded, and over the next year, dairy farms across Iowa and the country started doing the same. The campaign drew national attention, and by March of 1985, over 700 dairy farms were involved, and over 1.5 billion milk cartons with images of missing kids were distributed nationwide. Most Americans drank milk, and having a carton of milk in your fridge was totally normal. It was a way to get a missing child's face out there. But let's learn more about these 3 young boys, starting with Johnny Gosch. Of the 3 cases we're going to talk about over the next couple of episodes, Johnny Gosch's case is probably the most famous and probably the most well-known cold case in Iowa. It was very early on September 5th, 1982, and Johnny's brother tapped on his door to make sure he was awake. Johnny was a paperboy, so he had to be up early. When he set out that morning on his paper route, he was wearing a white sweatshirt with Kim's Academy on the back, warm-up pants, blue rubber flip-flops. He was carrying a yellow paper bag, and he was also pulling a red wagon. Now, normally, Johnny's father, John Gosch, would accompany him on his paper route, but it's reported that this morning, Johnny went on his own. Johnny's mother, Noreen Gosch, told Aaron Brilbeck in a 2010 interview with Who TV Channel 13 that there were several other paperboys that witnessed a man drive up and approach Johnny. Witnesses said that this man was driving a blue Ford Fairmont. They said he shut off his engine, opened his door, and swung his feet out onto the curb. Now, this was right where the boys were assembling their morning newspapers. And apparently this man started asking questions and asking for directions, and specifically where was 86th Street. Noreen said that someone told her Johnny turned to another paperboy named Mike and said, "I've got my papers loaded, I'm scared, I'm getting out of here, and I'm going to head home." And apparently as Johnny left, the driver also took off. Now, it's reported that the man pulled the door shut and turned the engine on, but before he started driving, he flicked the dome light 3 times. He then pulled out and left. Noreen said she believes the driver was signaling another person who later grabbed Johnny. She also said another paperboy claimed that he saw a tall man come out from between 2 houses and follow her son. A CNN article by Thomas Lake said the driver was described as a white male in his 30s with a mustache and was somewhat dark complected. Now, in about 10 minutes, the stranger in the blue car asked 3 people for directions, and near the newspaper drop site, another stranger appeared. As Johnny walked north on 42nd Street, a very tall man was reported seen walking behind Johnny, following him. Now, just a short time later, 2 other paper carriers saw Johnny on Mark Court Lane. For reasons not made clear in the police report, Johnny apparently stopped pulling his wagon and sat down. Now, when the other paper carriers had gathered all of their papers, they went in the same direction where Johnny had reportedly walked and sat down. And they saw Johnny's wagon there, but Johnny himself was gone. Another witness at this time looked out their window and saw what may have been a silver and black Ford Fairmont running a stop sign, turning left on 42nd Street and heading north towards the interstate. Now, it doesn't, to me, seem like any of the kids ended up reporting this, because 2 hours later, Johnny's parents actually got a call from newspaper customers saying that their papers hadn't been delivered yet. According to an article on Johnny's case from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Johnny's father headed out and found Johnny's red wagon abandoned and still full of bundles of the Des Moines Sunday Register. Noreen said in a CNN article that John Gosch actually delivered the rest of the papers, and that once he got back, they called police. Now, I haven't seen anything else verifying that, but she also said it took an hour for police to get to their home. So this is a lot of time that has passed. It was early in the morning when Johnny left his home to start his paper route. It said 2 hours went by from when witnesses saw Johnny sit down by his wagon to when the Gosch home started receiving phone calls. And I don't know how much time went by between then and when Noreen called police. And then she claims another hour went by until they got to her home. So that is a lot of time. And when you are talking about a possible child abduction, those are very critical moments. West Des Moines Police Lieutenant Jeff Miller, who was a rookie cop at the time, told Aaron Brilbeck that they began scouring the area immediately, but were constantly running into roadblocks. He said, quote, "They went ahead and called in the staff, the troopers, they called in detectives, reserves, contacted Polk County sheriffs, the state patrol. At that point, they did a door-to-door canvass of the neighborhood, trying to find someone who saw something of Johnny. But nothing was found, and there was no sign of him." Now, Noreen, over the years, has been an outspoken advocate for her son. She has written books, she started the Johnny Gosch Foundation, and developed a program called In Defense of Children, aiming to raise awareness of human trafficking and crimes involving children. But she really lost faith in the system when her son was abducted. She said initially police asked her questions insinuating her son was a runaway, a theory she will not entertain. To her, it is clear her son was abducted. Moreover, she does not believe police and investigators did near enough to investigate her son's case in the first 72 hours. She said that as volunteers searched the woods and fields for Johnny, some reported that Chief Cooney at the time told them to go home because the kid is probably just a damn runaway. Now, Noreen's view of how police handled the investigation is really what prompted her to become an advocate. In addition to what I mentioned, Noreen has testified before Congress, and she also worked to pass the Johnny Gosch bill, which reportedly requires police to respond immediately instead of waiting like you see in so many cases. But I'll note that from what I understand with this bill, it's only in cases where foul play is suspected, according to an article from the Des Moines Register. Now, a case we'll talk about in the third part of this series is of Mark Allen, and in that case, when he went missing, it does seem like there was a delay in police responding. While Noreen has been an incredible advocate, she has also brought a little controversy to the case through some statements she's made and through some experiences she claims that she's had. In 1997, after Johnny had been missing for almost 15 years, Noreen said that while she was asleep in the middle of the night in her home, she was awoken by someone knocking at the door. Noreen got up and was initially afraid because she said she had received various threats since her son's disappearance, which, if you have followed true crime cases, this definitely happens. There are some crazy people out there. But she said in this case, she looked through the peephole. She said 2 men were standing in the hallway and that one of these men looked like Johnny. Now, at this point, Johnny would be about 27 years old. She, though, is adamant that her son visited her that night. She said she let him in, they hugged, they spoke, and he told her what happened to him, but apparently left out any details of sexual abuse. Noreen claims that he only stayed an hour or two, and there wasn't enough time to tell the whole story because he said he was on the run from the people who abducted him and that he was barely able to support himself. He was apparently unsure if visiting his mother was even a good idea, as he was told, while in captivity, that his mother would be killed if he ever tried to contact her. She said Johnny told her that he would never be safe until the perpetrators were arrested and brought to justice. He asked her to do something about it. Now, people criticized Noreen about this because she never called police, and that when Johnny stood up to leave, she didn't try to stop him. Now, Noreen said she didn't because he was now old enough to make his own decisions. Noreen reportedly watched him leave, went back to her home, and prayed for strength. But she knew that her mission was clear. It gave her an extra push to find who did this and what happened so that justice could finally be served and so Johnny could come out of the shadows. Now, investigators who work on the case now have said a little about her statement and her story, but they say that it is hard to believe, but that they don't want to call her a liar. Others in the public have definitely, though, questioned her credibility. Now, whether or not Noreen's story is true, she has been a tireless advocate, and I can't imagine the pain and trauma she must experience every day without answers to what happened to her son. And to put into context, Johnny's disappearance happened just over a year after the murder of Adam Walsh, a young boy who was abducted from a department store on July 27th, 1981. His brutal murder got national attention, and once Johnny was abducted, there was an immense fear throughout communities across the nation. It was this fear that your child could meet such a horrible end, or that they could disappear and never be found. Johnny Gosch is still listed as a missing person, and someone out there knows what happened to him. If you have any information at all, please reach out to the contact information I will put in the description of this episode. But this story doesn't end with Johnny. See, he wasn't the only paperboy to disappear from Des Moines, Iowa. Just 2 years later, another young boy would go missing under eerily similar circumstances. His name was Eugene Martin, and his story raised even more questions about what was happening in central Iowa during the 1980s. In the next episode, we will examine the disappearance of Eugene Martin, what connects it to Johnny's case, what aspects are different, and why all of these years later, there are still no answers. I'm Becca, this is Cardinal Crimes, and we will see you next time.